What is up, everybody? I'm Get Flinged. Welcome to episode 2 of the history of Rainbow Six Siege. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on Operation Black Ice. This is the first full season DLC of Rainbow Six Siege, and it introduced two operators that remain relevant in Siege today. A map that maybe isn't so much, but a lot of big things came this season, and we're going to go over some old gameplay, my thoughts, my memories, some old videos, patch notes, Steam charts, all that. So, if you missed episode 1, we went over the core concept and launch of Rainbow Six Siege. That video will be linked to the top right hand corner of the screen right now. You can check that out when you get a chance. I'm going to be creating a playlist on my channel that'll host all of these history of Siege videos in one place there. Also, if you're enjoying this series and you want to support me, keep in mind I do have a charm in game that you can get by going over to my Twitch channel, subscribing, either Prime or normal sub will get you the in-game charm there as long as you have your accounts linked, and it helps me out, gets you a cool charm in game, and it's really appreciated. So keep that in mind.
Keep an eye out for contact. Eyes open.
Tango spotted. Enemy contact.
Ready for company. Deploying welcome mat. Hostiles in my sight!
All right, with that said, let's get into Operation Black Ice now. It was released on February 2nd, 2016. It was originally scheduled to be released in January, but was actually delayed. With Operation Black Ice, we got two new operators, Buck and Frost, the new map Yacht, and of course, several game tweaks and fixes that we'll cover in the patch notes section whenever we get there. This was the first time that players got to experience the games as a service model that Siege was using. So let's go into that model a little bit here. The map was free to all players and playable in all game modes immediately. So if you owned Rainbow Six Siege when February 2nd hit and the new season launched, you got the new map and it was playable and it was thrown into all the game modes. Okay. The operators, Buck and Frost, were exclusively available to season pass holders for 1 week. So if you owned the season pass of Rainbow Six Siege, you got them at no additional cost, and nobody else could buy them with renown or credits for that first week. After the first week was up, everybody had access to them for 25,000 renown or 600 R6 credits. Regarding that cost for operators, I read an article that had the devs talking about the expectations as far as play times and what it would cost to earn an operator that I thought was pretty interesting. I hadn't ever read this before. So this is like words coming from the devs, okay? And I'll read it here. Each new post-launch operator can be unlocked by playing approximately 25 hours. The data we have suggests that average FPS player spends 8 to 10 hours a week playing their favorite FPS. So it should only take between 2 to 3 weeks maximum to unlock an operator. With about 3 months between each season of content, we hope players will, with regular game time, won't have trouble saving up enough renown to unlock both new operators upon their release. So with this in mind, the new app's free. The operators, you can pay cash or R6 credits for, or you can grind renown and then buy them that way. You have the option of earning them for free. At this point, really all of the content in the game was free. I'm not sure if there was any cosmetics that were purchased only at this point. I know there weren't any elites yet. So that's pretty cool. And I remember that at the time as a player coming from Call of Duty. Call of Duty at that time was doing Black Ops 3. Advanced Warfare. They had loot boxes in both of those games where you had guns in there, and it was pure luck whether you got the gun. And the guns were some of the best guns in the game. Advanced Warfare, you think about the Obsidian Steed, it was the best gun in the game by far. And if you didn't have that gun, you were at a disadvantage. So it felt really luck-based, and it kind of felt cheap. So going from that model to this, where you get the game, There's, nothing behind a paywall that's stat altering at all, and you can grind and earn everything in game for free. It felt really welcoming and nice. All right, let's get into the operators now that came with Operation Black Ice, and both Buck and Frost are from the Canadian Joint Task Force 2, or JTF2 CTU. This is how Wikipedia describes JTF2. JTF2 is an elite special operations force of the Canadian Armed Forces. Serving under the Canadian Special Operations Forces Command, JTF2 is known to work with other special operations forces such as Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, the British SAS, and the British SBS. The unit has distinguished itself as a world-class special operations unit. So I think the fact that they decided to go to Canada for their first season of Siege, it probably pays homage to the country in which the majority of Siege was developed in, that coming from the Ubisoft Montreal studio in Canada. And there's also the, fact that Canada has, the French-Canadian portion of that country. Ubisoft is a French company, so there's strong ties there. Also, the fact that North America is a huge games market doesn't hurt, I'm sure. But it was pretty cool. The theme of this season fit well with the winter. It's in February, so it's winter. The yacht was in ice, winter, frost, all that. It just kind of fit. Going into the details now with the operators, Buck launched as a 2-armor 2-speed. His original loadout was the C8 SFW AR and the Cameras DMR as primaries, the MK19 as his secondary pistol, and stun grenades and breaching charges as his secondary gadget. The secondary gadget surprised me here. I would have said that he originally launched with frag grenades, but that was not the case. He didn't get them until later, and then of course now we know he doesn't have them. But yeah, I would have guessed that he launched with frag grenades, so that kind of surprised me when I saw that. All right, getting into Buck's gadget now, the skeleton key, the underbarrel shotgun, and the first thing I'll say about this is at the time that Buck was released, for me as a player, whenever I saw Buck and I saw that gadget, I thought, cool, this operator has an AR and a shotgun, and I didn't really think of it as a destruction tool. I thought of it as use the AR at distance, use the shotgun up close. You get the best of both worlds there. I never really remember using it for destruction that early on. And now that's on me as a player, but also it's partially because it wasn't very good at destruction. And they've actually, over time, really increased the effectiveness of the skeleton key at destruction and nerfed it from a lethal standpoint. But on the screen right now, I'm showing you the destruction that it originally caused. It was smaller holes. Sometimes it wouldn't go through both panels. It seemed more difficult to destroy studs, and it just wasn't nearly as good. And you can see they patch it, and we'll go over the patch notes. It's actually in this season that they improve it significantly, and it became much more effective at destruction at that point, and much closer to what we have today. But yeah, I mean, at that time, I wasn't really thinking about the destruction aspect of it. And that probably plays into why they chose Buck as, one of the first operators to introduce into the game. Buck has that tool with the skeleton key that plays into, the sandbox nature with the destruction and being able to exploit that destruction and having a tool to be creative with that destruction with that skeleton key. But also, if you're just a simple-minded FPS player like me, you can come in and that skeleton key can help you get kills, and it makes sense right from the get-go. So you kind of, kill two birds with one stone there. Buck has been in the meta pretty much the entire time that he's been in Siege. I think you could probably say that right now, current day Siege is probably the least amount that we see him in his history. And he's still picked a lot. Like, I don't want to make it sound like he's not useful or anything like that. Buck has still picked a lot, even at the higher levels. But, losing the frag grenades was a big loss to him. Sledge kind of took over that role there. I think, people are just, it used to be, there was a time whenever it was just like, pick Buck. Now, Buck is a little bit more site specific. If you need that vertical destruction going up and down, then, people will gravitate to Buck over Sledge. Buck mains also really stick out to me. I think there's a lot of similarities between people who main Buck and people who main Smoke, in that it's an operator you really have to learn, and an operator that's tough to master. You got to really spend a lot of time to master Buck. One, because the recoil on his AR is significant. It was an outlier. Guns in Siege now have a little bit more recoil than they used to, but from the get-go, Buck's AR had more than your average amount of recoil. So learning that recoil as a buck main was something that took some time. Learning how to use the skeleton's key effectively and the good lines of sight. You know, when you're attacking this site, here's the places I need to go as buck to get the best lines of sight. That took time to learn. Learning how to get the most out of the frag grenades when he had them. That was another skill that was important for a buck main. And then also, I think knowing how to navigate the map in order to get to the places you wanted to go as buck and be effective there while dealing with roamers was difficult as well. There's a lot of players that didn't have the patience for that, didn't have the patience to trust teammates to watch their back or to drone themselves. They just wanted to have like an operator they could be more direct with. So I think buck mains are definitely like players in Siege that, you know, they've gravitated to that operator, they've mastered them, and they're rewarded for it, but they definitely are kind of outliers. All right, moving on to Frost now, and her original loadout was the Super 90 shotgun and 9mm C1 SMG as her primaries, the MK1 9mm pistol as her secondary, and the deployable shield and nitro cell as her secondary gadgets. Her gadget, the Frost mat, remains viable even today, and strangely has always been more effective at the higher ranks than at the lower. When Frost mats were introduced into this game, they were extremely effective, and they still are to a certain degree, but when they were introduced, like, you would get so many kills with them. And it was because people weren't trained to look for them yet. You know, since, you know, nowadays when you mantle in through a window, it's almost second nature for a lot of players to just kind of shoot down to see if there's a frost trap there and get rid of it and move on. But we didn't have those habits initially. So you got a lot of people in those traps. And it was frustrating. You know, it led to this famous clip of Dr. Disrespect rage quitting Siege.
End.
First death.
I'm dead because I stepped on something. A bear trap. Bear trap makes me want to quit to the desktop, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm playing shooter games, you know what I mean? You know, we're playing shooter games. That right there takes me immediately out. Not interested. Done.
Now listen, that frost trap was right there on the ground. Doc should have seen that. He should have gotten rid of it. That's on him. But what I will say is I remember being frustrated by them. I remember thinking like, okay, as an attacker, if I kill Frost and then I'm in a 1v1 at the end and I jump in through a deployable shield and die to a frost trap, that's really frustrating because I killed that Frost and that Frost still clutched up from the grave. That was a strange feeling to me. And I remember being frustrated by that. One of the, you know, probably the core design decisions in Siege was that Defender utility, once put out, remains out even after they die. You know, you could very easily imagine a world in which the utility disappears once the Defender dies. I've talked about that in videos before. But yeah, I remember being frustrated. I'm not gonna, you know, completely let Doc off the hook there, but it was a frustrating mechanic when introduced. Another frustrating part of it actually came from playing as Frost, and that was that people would steal your kills. And it was so frustrating because, you know, you would get somebody to jump in your mat, you would get them down, you would hear the loud sound go off, and then you would go over to like finish them off because they're in the down but not out stage, and then a teammate would go and take it, and then they would get credit for the kill. At that time, they got credit for the kill. That was a very recent change actually when they they changed how the kills are awarded from the down but not out stage. And there were so many games I remember where that happening and somebody, you know, ended up team killing the other person because of it. Hey, you stole my kill, and then team killing. So there was a little bit of frustration there playing as Frost as well. When you talk about the history of Frost, though, you have to mention the Super 90 shotgun and how ridiculously strong it was at launch. It earned the nickname the Sniper 90 because there were so many clips out there of people getting kills with it at ridiculous ranges. Like ranges you would never even dream of getting kills with in a shotgun in today's game. And they eventually nerfed it, of course. But honestly, the Sniper 90 at launch may be one of the most overpowered weapon states that this game has ever seen. You know, I know Ella's SMG at launch was really, 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 really strong, but the Sniper 90 is up there. If not the strongest, it's up there for sure. Frost has never consistently been a top 5 defender in the meta, but she's always been a reliable pocket strat operator that can catch attackers by surprise, even in Pro League. And some of the most fun times watching, pros play is whenever they fall into a Frost mat. They've earned the nickname the Pog mat in Twitch chat, and seeing that happen even at that level, it's always a funny death. And whenever it happens to you, it's not real funny, but usually you and your teammates will get a laugh about it later once everybody calms down. And seeing it happen to the pros is funny as well. I think that, one of the things that's kind of developed with her over time is, putting her Frost mat on a window can put an attacker in a lose-lose situation. Even if they know it's there, if they don't have any utility to clear it, then when they mantle in that window, they either die to a Frost mat or they die to a person watching it and shooting, because they have to, shoot down. It leaves them in a vulnerable state. So that kind of use of it is why I think it's been used even at the higher levels consistently as a pocket strat throughout the years. Interesting tidbit on Frost's history is that she was the first female defender introduced into Rainbow Six Siege. Overall thoughts on Buck and Frost. First thing that comes to mind is that they changed the rules. As a player, Buck and Frost changed the rules. We'd been playing the game and there were certain, things that could happen. And granted, in Siege, there's always a huge amount of variables in what can happen in a round. But when Buck and Frost were introduced, those got compounded even more. You never had to worry about jumping in a window and dying to a trap on the ground. Yes, Kapkan traps were in the game, but at that time they had that red line. You didn't have to look for them. Now with Frost in the game, actual mechanics of the game changed. As a defender, Buck changed the game in that, Sledge could destroy the ceiling above you and look down on you. But if you were on the top floor, you didn't have to worry about somebody looking from the floor up. Buck changed that. He could create that soft destruction by shooting up. That changed those rules. Now, granted, at my level, that didn't happen a lot at that time, but it certainly developed over time. And that's really a moment that sticks out to me as a Siege player, is that, I recognize at this point, okay, this game is different and this game is going to drastically change over time. And, this is a game I'm going to come back to every season and check out what the new operators in the new map are, because there's going to be a lot of variety here. I'd played games before where there were maybe like new guns introduced, but I'd never played a game before where a new season drops and the rules are changed and there's completely different mechanics that you have to learn and get used to. And that was really refreshing. All right, let's move on to the map that dropped with Operation Black Ice, and that is Yacht. This map is set in the Hudson Bay of Canada. It's a luxury yacht that got frozen into some ice. Apparently in the lore there's supposed to be like a submarine nearby that kind of adds to like the pressure of the mission. I think, if we're being honest, Yacht didn't age well. But at the time, we didn't really know what a good map was in Rainbow Six Siege. We didn't. So we were just happy there was new content and the map looked really cool. And it was very theatrical, like playing this game where you would see a boat and you would go inside the boat and playing through around that way. It was very, very theatrical. Yacht hasn't gone down as the most competitively viable map in history, but at the time I still remember seeing it and be like, that's cool, and having fun on it. I think one of the things that really held it back was the lack of destruction, the lack of vertical destruction as well. I don't really remember, outside of the hatches, I don't remember much vertical destruction on that map at all. It just kind of made the gameplay very linear. You think about those so many long, narrow hallways. It felt very like you were being like funneled into places, and a lot of those gunfights taking place in those skinny hallways didn't really feel that satisfying. So I don't think that Yacht really exemplified the strengths of Rainbow Six Siege very well. And that's why it hasn't really aged all that well. Now, we can't talk about Operation Black Ice without mentioning what is probably the most famous weapon skin in Rainbow Six Siege, which is Black Ice, and that is the seasonal weapon skin for this season. There were also 2 other skins introduced here, the GTF2 skin and the US a winter camo. And I was wrong whenever I said before that everything was free. So the Black Ice skin was only available with R6 credits. So at that time, you could buy that as a seasonal weapon and you would get the Black Ice skin on all of the current guns in the game. but it was only available with R6 credits. You couldn't get that with Renown. They've since obviously made Black Ice available through alpha packs and introduced Black Ice on new weapons through Bravo packs, which I'm okay with. I didn't have the foresight to get the Black Ice weapon skins through the season pass at the time of playing, or through the R6 credits at the time of playing. So I'm glad I've been able to earn some through alpha packs and stuff like that, because I do like the skin. A lot of people, say that they think it's overrated. I don't think so. I think that Black Ice, while maybe like there are a few skins here and there that I like better overall, it's definitely the best seasonal skin in my opinion. And on many weapons, it's still my favorite skin that I own. All right, getting into the patch notes now, and we're going to start with patch 1.2, which is the rollout patch for Operation Black Ice. We went over the operators, we went over the map, we went over the Black Ice skins. This is big. Spectator camera on all platforms. Might not seem like a big deal, but up until this was introduced, you couldn't spectate games. So for esports, there was no way for us to spectate and get that top-down view. With the introduction of this, an 11th player was able to go into these lobbies and be the spectator, so that you could, broadcast these matches to people and allow them to watch. So that was, might not seem like a big deal, but that's pretty significant in the scheme of things. As far as balancing, operator shouts are now muted for the enemy team. So when operators had voice lines and stuff like that, they would play and the other team could hear them. So they removed that for gameplay reasons. Makes sense. Defender objective rotation for ranked. I don't remember this because I didn't really play ranked at that time, but they talk in here about how now you can't go back to a site until you've played the other sites. So, or won the other sites. So does that mean that you could play the same site up to this point over and over and over again? Or was it just random what site it went to? Maybe that's what they talk about, is now you can vote on what site you want to go to, and this is how it's going to work. I bet that's what they're going over there. Reduce bullet trail intensity, especially for suppressed weapons. Increase the flashbang range of effect. Reduce noise levels of multiple defender gadgets. I remember this. If you were next to a mute jammer, it was so loud. So this was a big change. Reinforced walls now block bullets while being deployed. Makes sense. Same thing with castle. As you're deploying castle barricades, they block bullets. They gave Thatcher the English M590 shotgun. And then Bandit's electric damage was eliminated from the hostage. So you didn't have to worry about killing the hostage with Bandit's electricity damage. As far as some other things here, some spawn location changes. You can now spawn in different locations. Before this, all the attackers spawned in the same location. So now, in ranked at least, attackers could spawn in their very own and choose where they wanted to spawn. Some changes to how they separated the ranks. So they say here that our data shows that the upper ranks, gold, platinum, and diamond, are less populated than expected. Therefore, we have reworked how our players are distributed through the ranks. And they kind of break down the percentages here that they were and then here's where they want it to be. Of note, only 5% of the player base at this time would be platinum or above. So that's kind of heartwarming to read. If you've ever hit plat, during this time, then you were in the top 5% of players. It mentions the tactical board right here. I don't think they're supporting this anymore, but it was something like, it was a web-based program that you could go to and look at the maps and develop strats and like share, move things around. It was actually pretty cool. I don't think they're supporting it anymore, but something I wanted to mention there. All right, moving on, we'll go to patch 2.1. They mentioned the spectator camera here again. So maybe it didn't roll out actually until this patch, which was on February 11th. So just, shortly after Operation Black Ice rolled out. Data center, more stuff for custom games. Just, again, paving the way for Pro League and stuff like that to begin. Balancing. Tweaked Blitz head model and hitbox to have the same amount of exposure as the other shield-wielding operators and recruits. Blitz opponents were able to headshot him with ease over his shield due to his big head model. We've reduced the size of his head model and made his shield taller. They go to before and after here. So that's before. See how much of his head you can see there. Let's see. And then after, okay, yeah, that's a pretty big change. And fair fight cheating message. So in the episode 1, I said I didn't remember what the cheating anti measures were because BattlEye wasn't in the game at this point. It was fair fight, as mentioned here. All right, moving on to patch 2.2. They added a report button. So up until this point, you couldn't report somebody. They added that. Introduction of kill cam into ranked. And you can kind of see, based upon these and a lot of these, that cheating and toxicity was a problem. And they were trying to do stuff to combat that. So up until this point in ranked, there was no kill cam. You would die, you would see that like initial screen when you died, and then that was it. And that was for gameplay reasons. You know, in a competitive environment, should you be able to see a kill cam that shows you the location of the person that killed you and give you that information? And they didn't want that. And that's still the way it is in actual comp. Today, there are no kill cams. But they introduced it into rank to help you identify cheaters more and to get more information on cheaters. They added more spawn killing countermeasures. They changed a bunch of different spawn locations, put some barriers up to help protect from those insta spawn peaks that existed. Improved the matchmaking in ranked. And that's about it. We'll move on to 2.2.1, IP protection. This is kind of crazy, actually. So up until this point, there was a way to get the enemy team's IP addresses from in-game, and they added protection from that. You think about that from a player privacy standpoint, that's pretty significant, as well as the ability to boot players once you get their IPs. So kind of crazy that ever existed. All right, moving on to patch 2.3. A lot of patches this season. And this is where we get some balance, okay? Frost. We tweaked the fall-off damage of Frost Shotgun. The fall-off damage previously started at 5 meters. It will now begin at 3.5 meters, making it roughly on par with the M1014. We have made this choice because Frost Super 90 had too much range, making Frost too powerful alongside her Nitro cells and welcome mats. So I mentioned earlier that Frost, the Super 90, got the Sniper 90 name, and this is where they start to nerf it. I think there were more nerfs. We'll see in future episodes if they nerf it some more. But they've already started, the season's not even over yet, and they've already started nerfing that shotgun. It was so strong. Buck. We designed Buck with the intention of having him be a versatile operator that is able to go wherever he desires. We do not believe that the state he currently is in reflects this. The initial intent was to use his underslung shotgun as a tool and not so much as a weapon. As the pros have shown us in Pro League, it is working as a tool, but it could definitely be more efficient and useful. Therefore, we've decided to increase the environmental destruction of Buck's underslung shotgun as the following series of gifts show. So this is where I mentioned before that they improved the destruction with Buck's shotgun. I showed you the before and after with the kill holes and how that looks and the improvement that they made there. But yeah, this was a significant change to Buck. An interesting bit of history here with the SMG-11, okay? They increased the recoil on this patch because the SMG-11 was so good, and at this time, you could put an ACOG on the SMG-11. So I believe at this time, all defenders had access to the ACOG, including the SMG-11. And we're going to see in future episodes, they remove the ACOG from SMG-11 pretty early, but like people were just like frying with this gun. It was like the best gun in the game. So they added recoil, and then later you're going to see them remove the ACOG. More spawn killing measures that they're tweaking here, trying to protect players. More hit registration improvements. They talk about lag compensation so that lower ping players don't have an advantage over higher ping players. That was a problem for like the first couple years of Siege. Ranked matchmaking improvements. Ranked matches will only start if there are 10 players in the lobby. Imagine the frustration of a ranked match starting and there only being 3 people on your team. And then ranked reconnection mechanics have improved. Casual matchmaking improvements. And some more custom match spectator improvements. Cheating counter measure improvements. So again, you see this theme here of combating toxicity and cheating. It's been an ongoing fight for the history of Siege, no doubt about it. That's all the patches for Operation Black Ice. Next patch goes into the next season, so we'll talk about that in the next episode. All right, getting into the Steam charts for Operation Black Ice. We're going to go down here to the bottom. It launched in February of 2016. So February, March, April, we'll call Black Ice, Operation Black Ice. Didn't really move the needle that much. You know, you look right here at February, Siege was averaging 9,263 players. March, it went down to 6,125. April, it went down. It came back up from March, but still down from February at 7,643. So one thing I would notice here is that the peak players in April jump up. So part of April is probably a new season launch. But, I would attribute this a little bit to maybe, the game launching in December and just getting a little bit of fatigue. That first season didn't maybe hit as hard for as far as drawing players to the game. It did for me. I remember seeing the advertisements for it and be like, oh, I'm going to go try it out. But also, as I'm doing research for this, there wasn't a lot of press around this. As you'll see in future episodes when we cover a season, there's going to be multiple trailers. There's going to be dev interviews. There's going to be stuff like that I'm going to be able to pull from. In searching and doing research for this, there really wasn't a lot of that stuff. So I'm not sure how hard this season was marketed. And the fact that it was delayed from January may have affected that. And, maybe it's just a case of they released in December, and at this point, they're still kind of trying to catch up with themselves. So they just kind of get this season out there, but they're still in a state of trying to get these patches out. You can see there were several patches over the course of this season. So that's kind of how I explain this, in Operation Black Ice not really moving the Steam charts at all. I thought it would be interesting to go back and take a look at my channel and how I was covering the game and what kind of content I was making about the game at the time during these seasons. And for Operation Black Ice, it looks like I only made one video, and that was me talking to my community, which was mostly made up of Call of Duty players. I probably had 1,000 or 2,000 subscribers at the time. And I was just explaining why I've been playing a lot of Rainbow Six Siege and, presenting it to them to see if it might be something that they're interested in. And I'll play a couple clips from that video now.
And in the beginning of this game, when you're first starting out, you're going to spend a lot of time watching other players. And that can be very boring. And that's probably the hardest thing about this game. But I don't know. Have you guys ever bought an album or a CD if you're older like me? And the first time, maybe even the second time you listen to it, you're like, I don't know about this. But the more you listen to it, the more you pick up, and eventually it really catches on with you, and it ends up becoming one of your favorite albums. That's kind of how Rainbow Six is. The first couple games that you play in Rainbow Six, you're not going to have very much fun. You're going to be like, what is going on? It's going to be very confusing. Just the controls themselves can be very confusing. But the more you play it, the more you'll pick up on. And I think that if you give it a chance and play it a good bit, you'll come around and see that it is actually a really fun game once you get the hang of it. But there's a very steep learning curve with this game because it's so different and the play style is so different. Now, in Call of Duty, gun skill is king. So if you have great gun skill in Call of Duty, you can do a lot of things that don't make any tactical sense and get yourself out of trouble because you're going to win the majority of your gunfights. In Rainbow Six Siege, that is not the case. Gun skill matters very little in this game. It's all about positioning, and it's all about patience and strategy in this game. And the gun skill, it helps. It's not a non-factor whatsoever, but it's not the number one factor. That is for sure.
Well, that doesn't sound very fun at all.
You're right. At first, it's not very fun at all. You don't know where to go. You don't know, where the enemy is going to be coming from. You don't know how to use your tools. It's very daunting at first. There's a steep learning curve with this game, like I said. But it becomes very fun once you start to get the hang of it. Once you start to learn, the enemy's tendencies and how to, to properly defend and, how to attack and not, die right away and how to spend more time alive and get more kills. This game becomes very fun because this game puts you in some of the most epic situations. The gameplay you're just watching, I just rappelled up on this roof, busted it out, and now I'm looking in and waiting for people to pop out. And now I'm going to charge into this room, guns blazing and die. But that's an epic situation. That's so, and it's so realistic and so hard that it feels very fun and very exciting to do all this stuff. All right, so guys, I'm not going to go into all the crazy details about how the operators work and just how the game works, because
I think that you can kind of tell from the way I talk about the game in that clip that Rainbow Six Siege to me was very refreshing. And I mentioned it earlier with the monetization and how other games were doing loot boxes, and to come into this game and it felt very fair. That was part of it. It felt very refreshing to come into a game where you could earn everything, and it felt balanced and competitive from not a pay to win situation like other games were feeling at that time with the loot boxes. Also, it was refreshing in the amount of depth and just how different the game played than other games that I was playing at the time. And I think you can really hear that come through in me talking about that. As far as my memories of playing the game at that time and how it was different, keep in mind, I was playing only casual, but I think you can tell from that gameplay, again, how slow the game was. And that kind of plays into, I think, why Frost was so successful at that time and so strong at that time. There were so many rounds where, as an attacker, you would get down to the last 30 seconds and it would be like a mad rush into sight because you were playing so slow. And that's when those Frost mats, you didn't have time to check, and they would get so many kills in like the final 30 seconds. But yeah, I mean, in that gameplay right there, you see, me playing as Buck, and, it's 2 minutes into a round on house, everybody's still alive. We as attackers, we sit there on the top 2 floors of house for a full minute and nobody dies. House turned into one of the most spawn peaky and fastest paced maps in the game before the rework. It probably still is, to that matter, but you can just see how much slower the game played back then. I'm sure it wasn't that way at all skill levels. I'm sure in ranked, at the higher skill levels, it was starting to speed up and defender aggression was becoming more and more prevalent. But at that time, at my skill level in casual, it was still really slow, and it was still a lot of defenders on site and attackers going really slow. I think some overall thoughts on Operation Black Ice. It gave us the best weapon skin in the game. It gave us Buck, one of the coolest attackers in the game, I think. Frost, one of the funniest operators in the game, but not a meme by any means. I mean, Frost is viable. I don't mean to make it sound like she's a joke, but just some of the hardest times I've laughed in this game have been from Frost mats. Yacht, again, it didn't age well, but I think overall, Operation Black Ice, it gave us a taste of what we were going to see in this game for the next 8 years, and what we're still seeing today for that matter. We were going to get new seasons every 3 months, and they were going to introduce operators that changed the way that the game was played, and it was going to freshen things up. And they were going to introduce new maps that were going to be experimental, and they were going to try different things. Some of those were going to work, and some of those weren't. And, I think maybe Yacht is one of those that didn't, but you can't blame them for trying. As much as we as players didn't know what a good map was at that time, I think, the devs probably were figuring that out as well. I don't ever fault anybody for taking the experiment and really trying to push the envelope there. And I think maybe Yacht is an example of that. All right, so there you have it. That is Operation Black Ice, Episode 2. Next season we're going to be covering is Operation Dustline. That is going to be a spicy one. Make sure you're subscribed. Drop a like on the video so you don't miss that one. I'm hoping to have it over the next week or so. So stay tuned, and I'll see you on the next one.